Hi, and welcome to How Humans Heal. I'm Dr. Doni Wilson, and today I'm excited to interview Matt Belair. He is a performance coach who has a ton of experience in his life helping athletes, traveling, learning spirituality from different areas of the world, and now he's helping people to coach them on their life and their performance in their life. Thank you so much for being here, Matt.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you again. You were on my show, and I just loved everything you said. So it's great to chat with you again.
It's really fun, and I'm looking forward to this conversation because, this is the kind of thing that we don't all stop long enough to even have this conversation a lot of times. We're racing through our lives, trying to get through our to-do list every day, and maybe we might have a moment on the weekend or when we're driving when we're like, am I really doing what I want to be doing with my life? And if I wanted to do something else with my life, how could I even do that? And so I just love that this is your area that you help people with. And so tell us a little more, first of all, like, how did you even find that this is what you were passionate about doing?
Well, for me, I think what you said too is a really great beginning because it's interesting how people don't think about these things. And for me, it came naturally. I remember being in high school and all my friends were looking at what university they wanted to go to, but nobody was talking about traveling or what they were interested in or what they were passionate about or what they wanted to learn. They were all looking for, what's like kind of a career that I could do and not hate, not love. Yeah, I kind of like this and do that for the rest of your life. And I was thinking 40 hours a week, 2 days, 2 days off on the weekends and like 2 weeks off a year. I know actually some places like Finland and I think around there they get a lot of holidays, but in Canada it's not very much. And I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way. That cannot be all of my life. And so, from a young age, I liked martial arts and I was always doing martial arts, which is the development of mind, body, and spirit. And then in my teenage years, I was always an athlete doing sports and skateboarding and snowboarding. And I started to look into things like meditation and enlightenment and consciousness and lucid dreaming and spirituality. And I was just very curious about these topics. And I was curious about the idea of who am I and why am I here and what the heck is going on this planet. And so I was a young man and 20 and I traveled to the States and I went to this internet marketing seminar because I figured if I could make $2,000 a month online, this is back in the day before inflation and all the fun stuff we're dealing with then I could be almost anywhere on the planet. I could be in Canada, US, Australia, I could live very simply and have enough. And so as I did that, I ended up in Whistler snowboarding and studying all these different things. And then I did that for a bunch of years and I became a performance coach and ran snowboard camps over the world and started my first snowboard businesses and did okay. But then it became next time for the next time of the big travel. And so my whole pursuit was just trying to find the truth, the deeper questions in life around spirituality, who I am and who I came here to be and what I came here to offer the planet. And just trying to unravel some of the deeper mysteries in life. So for me, it's just always been something I've been very curious about, very passionate about, and have continued to pursue basically my whole entire life.
Awesome. I think it takes a lot of courage to do that, to follow that path. And it's along the lines of really, a philosophical path, right? Of like saying, "Hey, who are we as humans and what are we meant to do and what is this earth that we live on anyway?" Because I know you have you spoke about snowboarding and being out in nature. Do you find that nature inspires you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a huge one. There's a book called Jesus and the Essenes. And this is, and I'll preface it. Everything I say, that I go through so much information, and I have so many podcasts. So like, you got to double check everything I say, but I'll just do it to the best of my memory. But I believe Jesus and the Essenes. It was this group of people that apparently knew Jesus was going to come back, and whether you believe him or not, just you can take it for what it is. But they said there's 4 ways to know God. One of them was through study, so you could read all the spiritual books, all the spiritual texts, everything out there. One of them was through self-reflection, right? So meditation, deep meditation. The other was through a proper teacher, a teacher who's gone through the path, and then you go into that mentorship and you do all the things that you're supposed to do. And then the other one was nature. And you just stand out in nature. And my time with the Native Americans, that seemed to really fit. I was really big into meditation. And then one of my Native American teachers was like, why in the heck would you close your eyes and meditate on like a sunrise when you could look at it? And I was like, that it really does seem dumb when you put it like that. And then
Just open your eyes and look at the sunrise.
Yeah, so there's different tools, right, for what you wanna go for, but I remember, coming back to Whistler, and there's a friend that I had who I wouldn't call spiritual or awake or aware or in any way, he's kinda like a little bit crass and all these different things and kinda making crass jokes here and there, and when I came back after a few years, he was, like, so on spot on point with a lot of spiritual topics and just deep understanding and meeting, and I just say, "Hey, buddy, like, how did you figure this stuff out?" And he said, I just go out on my snowmobile almost every day and I spend hundreds of days in nature. So he didn't try to be spiritual. He didn't try to do anything, but and it's hard to define what you'd say spiritual is, but there wasn't in my life, I've always kind of been like this. And there hasn't been very many people or friends that I could speak to about deeper topics. Like, what do you think the meaning of life is? Why do you think you're here? What's most important to you? How do we find happiness here? What challenges or struggles are you going through? How do we live up to our highest potential? I like talking about these things, and that's why I started the podcast because nobody would talk to me about it. And that's why I had to have guests like you on there so we could go deep into these ideas and see how we could implement them into our own lives to improve the quality of our life, but also improve the way we could maybe support our friends, our families, and the planet as a whole.
I love it. And you're just so everybody knows, your podcast is the Mastermind Body and Spirit show, right?
Yep. And check out the episode we did because it was awesome.
It was awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And to be able to, because I think, a lot of times, like, even people think, okay, an athlete, it's their exercise, it's their workout that also can become almost like a spirituality and a way of connecting with themselves. But that you mentioned martial arts, and I've really been interested in martial arts in that martial arts tends to blend this concept of exercise with spirituality. In my book, Master Your Stress, I mention about Wu Wei, but maybe you can tell us a little bit more about, like, what is that concept of bringing exercise and spirituality together?
Yeah, that's a really important concept. And because I loved martial arts and Bruce Lee was one of my first mentors, I wasn't alive, but I would study everything he did and he said from a young age. And so, in martial arts, you have this side that is the mental, emotional, or spiritual or focus side, right? And so I'm looking as a kid and like, how do they break these stones, and then, it can't be just their hand and they say, well, we use the force kind of deal, right? And so I was like, oh, well, there's this force that I got to learn about, this mysterious, chi or Tao, the all pervasive force. And in regular sports like hockey, they don't talk about that. Football, they don't talk about that. Volleyball, they don't really talk about it. And it just became normal to me because I was a martial artist. And so I applied these techniques to skateboarding and got really good. I applied these techniques to snowboarding and got really good. And when I would teach it to other people, they would get really good. And these ideas were so simple, like how to visualize a trick, how to focus, how to calm your mind. I remember going to Whistler, British Columbia, where they have some of the biggest jumps in the whole world for snowboarding and skiing. They're anywhere between 60 and some of them are 100 feet. And it's, you're basically going top speed off these things. I remember the first time I saw one and it went off one. I was like, this is the craziest thing ever. Like my friend's like, you just got to go straight from here. And we were so far. Are you kidding me? Like I can't slow down. So I was like, holy smokes. And I talked to these people that are amazing. And they're like, they didn't even know how to quiet their mind. They didn't know how to visualize their tricks. They didn't know how to do all of these basic things. And I thought, how do they not know that? And that's what I began to integrate into my snowboard coaching, my athletic coaching, this mental, emotional, spiritual side that I learned through martial arts. But martial arts also has a very, very tough physical side. When I went to train with the Shaolin masters in China, and the reason why I did that, and I always wanted to do it, is because I'm curious about the limits of human potential. What are we capable of? And of anybody that I know on the planet, Wim Hof comes up because he's doing all the crazy things in the cold and ultra marathon runners and things like that. But the Shaolin monks and breaking stone and brick and all that kind of stuff with their hands, I had to know if it was real and if it was possible and how they did it. And before I went there, I trained at a professional MMA camp because I like martial arts and I also want to be practical. If I need to whoop somebody's butt, I would like the ability to, know that it works and that the technique should work and I should whoop their butt. And that's what UFC is for. So when I went there wasn't one athlete. These guys are pro fighters that could break stone. There wasn't one when I went to China that could do what these Shaolin monks could do. I don't know how they'd fare in a fight. I don't know. But the thing is, the level of mastery and what these Shaolin monks were capable of far surpassed these elite MMA, UFC, mixed martial arts athletes because they added that mental, emotional, spiritual side. And
Mm.
I interviewed Master Go, who could break stone with two fingers and over his elbows and every piece of his body. And the training there was basically hard qigong, among many other things. But hard qigong is basically punching and kicking something hard. So part of the I was poking a tree, and in these trees there was dent holes in the trees from practice. You had to punch the tree, you had to kick the tree, do all these different things. So that was hard qigong, conditioning the body to an absolutely insane amount of just stress and pain. And then you had the soft qigong though, which was the meditation and learning how to direct the energy. And so merging those two things makes it complete. You can't have one without the other if you want to achieve your highest potential, you know, your highest ability is. Because if you leave out one, like what Master Go said when he broke the bricks, he's like, I direct my energy, but he's directing his energy to these fingers that have been conditioned over years of time in the physical reality. So it's not negating one or the other. It's not like he's going into the Tao or the force and using all the force to do this miraculous thing. It's actually quite simple, but it's just so ludicrous that you would never think it's possible. So I remember thinking, well, if I applied that kind of simple dedication to what was the most meaningful to me in this life, then there's no way that I could fail. I would succeed to some level, whether, great success or minimal success. But as long as it mattered to me, that's still a success. Whatever that external measure is, it doesn't matter. And that's, the same thing with the podcast. I didn't do it for views. I've reached 150,000 downloads a month. I've gotten, censored and blacklisted to the point of almost zero downloads, but it's the journey of my intent is to find quality guests that have something amazing to share, to teach people that can help improve the quality of their lives. That's my intent. And the result isn't up to me. It's up to me to do the best quality of work that I can over a long period of time.
Wow. That's a That's such amazing insight because it's true. Sometimes we think we've failed or we think that we're not doing enough, but really how are we measuring that? We're measuring that just by some projection or perceived external uh, measurement that it may not even be real. But like what you're saying is it comes back to what matters to us in the end.
100%, your own value system. And that's one of the keys, I think, when you're trying to do your life by design rather than by default, right? Whatever the matrix or the world is going to give you. It's like, no, who am I? What do I want to do? What's most important to me? What are my values? What do I find important? How do I want to live my life? And you can figure that out, but you got to start by asking those questions. And 90% of people have just never asked themselves the basic question, then alone contemplate it, right? There's levels of thinking. You can think real quick for a second. Um, then you could consider something, for a few, but then you could sit and you could really mull over it. You could contemplate, you could ruminate, you could meditate, you could, you know, go really deep into it. And that's where the good stuff is. And we're not really taught that, right? As you said at the beginning, I call it the task list consciousness. You wake up, the alarm goes, and it kind of startles you up, like get out of bed. And then you just start running through tasks and you say, I'm tired. Well, I don't have time for that and this and that. And the truth is, it might be hard, but you have to make time. And if you can make a little bit of time for this self reflection, not complicated, it's just consistent, you can then steer your life and influence your life. If you give yourself 10 years of time, and that's the other thing that I learned with the Shaolin monks and other things, just now, if I'm going to create a new project, once I know what it is and how passionate I am about it, and I know that's the way I want to go, 10 years. You want to start a podcast? Give yourself 10 years. You want to write a book? Give yourself 10 years. You want to do change career? Give yourself 10 years. Because the idea is like you're never going to give up. And you could work your job and then do your side business of coaching or learning or education. And over time, the opportunity will be there. I think there's a quote or one thing. I don't really listen to Joe Rogan, but I remember Jamie Foxx clip came up once and this one resonated with me. He said he always did music and he loved music and he was looking for an opportunity to do music, but it never really panned out. And then the Kanye West song or whatever, and he came out and he was able to do like some of the vocals. And he said he was just ready. He just prepared for that. And I just feel like that's a good example of just doing the thing that you love and it's going to appear at some point.
And that makes so much sense, and it's would you say along the lines of, what maybe people call manifestation or law of attraction, or how do you relate to what you're describing to some of these, concepts that are maybe people have heard of?
Yeah, so my first mentor was actually Michael Lozier, who wrote the book, The Law of Attraction, and there's a few of them out there, and I think I've read every single one. The Science of Getting More of What You Want and Less of What You Don't, and I read the Abraham Hicks, I read his, and there's also one that a lot of people don't know about called the Master Key System, who is by Charles Hannell, who is a Freemason, which is very interesting. And so I read all those, and I was very curious about all those books. And you know, I always there's a couple of things I didn't agree with. Number 1 was they didn't talk about, like, the universal force, and not even you I'd say the God force, and I kind of prefer God force. I like the idea that I'm created. Anyone can believe whatever they want, and I've been to the Parliament of World Religions with Native American elders and studied a lot of different, religions and spiritual concepts and Buddhism and with Tibet, and I just like the idea that I'm created. Some divine force created me, and I'm here for a reason. That to me is much more empowering than I'm going through the universe and I was created by nothing and I'm evolving from a monkey and it just seems meaningless. So whatever you want to choose is totally fine for you. But I think that this life moves towards a creator. So that said, that creative force has the trump card. It has the power. It could change your life in any kind of way. And so I really resonate with the Zen concept. I studied a lot about Zen and I just like the balance of it where we are influencing our reality, right? We are influencing to the best of our ability. We can use the law of attraction. So it's going to be, I like Michael Lozier's definition that simply says the law of attraction states I attract more to my life, whatever I give my attention, energy, and focus to, whether positive or negative. That's it. So if you and I have never played ping pong and you play ping pong every single day for 4 hours, you study ping pong, you eat, sleep, you watch ping pong every single day, and I only practice maybe 20 minutes a week, who's going to kick whose butt after a year? Like that's common sense. It's how this universe works, right? So you factor that in. Well, you've got the creator saying, "Hey, you know what? This is not who you are. You're not listening to that inner voice. That's how you talk to God. It's you don't. I like what David Lombard, one of my Native Americans elders, taught me. He's like, you don't need a gatekeeper to God. That's what he told me at the Parliament of World Religions. And again, whatever you want to believe, that's up to you. This is just my opinion and my perspective. So just take it for what it is. But you don't need, he's like, you don't need me, this Native American elder, to connect you to God. You don't need this priest to connect you to God. You have that direct connection. And it's my opinion that it's that internal voice, that little whisper that we have. And that's why it's important to learn to be silent, to journal, to ask yourself important questions. And I really like the Buddhist frameworks of the Eightfold Path, which is, I don't know if I remember all of them, but it's right speech, right action, right livelihood, and there's a few other ones, and it just kind of makes sense. Do I want to be a good person? Do I want to be a powerful? What kind of person do I want to be here? And so, just to consider those things, and then to walk in that path, because the architecture of what the world or the matrix offers you is by design for someone else. And if you look deeply at those designs and those systems, they're not set up for individual preferences, right? And they're not going to be set up for your highest and best experience as it relates to you. They're just systems. And so that's where the Matrix movie can be helpful, where it's you learn the rules of what can be bent and broken, right? And you learn how to navigate life a little bit more differently suited to your preferences.
It really is about navigating life, isn't it? I sometimes think that I have these moments of like, you know what? We're just all humans going through this life experience and figuring it out as we go. And how do we address the health issues that come up? How do we process the experiences that we have? And I'm very curious because I'm also someone who loves to travel and I've learned so much from different cultures, just like you're describing. When I go to different cultures, I learn about their understanding of spirituality and the universe and our human experience, and I'm being able to then integrate that into the work I do to help people with their health. So I know you've created some techniques that you use in your performance coaching, and maybe you can describe that a little bit. How have you taken all these concepts and put them into tools you can use with as in your coaching?
Yeah, it's a great insight. I think there's a lot of value to traveling. There's a lot of value to listening to other people's perspectives. I learned something a long time ago called the formula for truth from a friend, and he does a deep dive on it. But the basic idea is that all information is simply that. It's just information. And I have my perspective, and you have your perspective. So that's two streams of information. And if you plot that on a graph of X and Y, truth, let's say, is about 45 degrees. Let's just say, right? If you're looking at a graph. Now, when you share your information, let's say it's polar opposite, God exists, and or you think that it's an atheist and we're just evolving from monkeys, right?
Yeah.
Total opposite. Whether it's politics, religion, whatever, it couldn't be more opposite. What mostly we do is we defend our point of view, but we already know it. We know our life experiences, we know our past, we kind of know our memories. We know our opinion. So we're usually defending our 45 degrees of information rather than opening up completely to the other person's perspective, to their point of view. And what that does, just imagine not just one person, like, oh, well, there's their 45 degrees of information from their life experience, their beliefs, everything that they've done and their opinions. Wow, that's just information that I've received now that I didn't have before because I'm not that person and I didn't have to defend my perspective. So imagine you did that with every single person you met. How much more information would you have over a week, over 2 weeks, over a month, or over a lifetime? You would be so much more open. You would have a much greater degree of pattern recognition, a much higher acuity to discern the truth. Then you would notice these patterns. And there are patterns all over the world when you learn about certain things of success, of failure, of all these different ideas. So I just want to start with sharing that because I feel like that is just such a powerful perspective to have. And then when we're thinking about techniques, I love techniques. I wrote a book called Zen Athlete, and it was all the best techniques around sports performance and sports psychology. But you can apply that to music. You can apply it to entrepreneurship. You can apply it to everything. It's basically a guide to mastery. I don't care what you want to master. Look at these principles, and this will help you on the path to mastery. And the most important step, though, is a self reflection, a self assessment of who you are, what your values are. I like to ask people, if money were no object, what would you do? If you could design your perfect day, what would that be? If you could know everything in the world about any subject, what would that be? If you could have any skill in the world, what would those skills be? And immediately master them and get close to your passions, your dreams. What things in the world really bug you? What would you change if you could change anything? What things fulfill you? What matters to you most? And getting very, very clear on that, then we go through the building blocks of how to create that. And then so once we're clear, then we look at the strategic side. You got your goal setting, you've got the mental, emotional visualization, and all those techniques, the law of attraction. And you also have the process of overcoming limiting beliefs. And a lot of people haven't done that, the shame and the guilt and the childhood trauma that most people have that sabotage them. And in working with literally thousands of people over my life and my career, I can say that they're fundamentally dealing with basically the same issues, right? Childhood traumas, not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy, fear of abandonment, fear of ostracization. We're all basically the same, but we have to process that individually to get to the next steps. And once we can be really focused on, that vision, and we won't quit for anything. We do our self-assessment. We go, some people call it shadow work. I think a lot of that gets missed. I think it's just understanding some of the blocks that we have and what we need, if you have this recurring mindset. And there's a lot of easy ways to figure out what that is and just process them so they're not unconsciously sabotaging you. Then once you've done that, then you're free to work and take action and to do it in a state. And this is something that I'm learning and I'm always learning, and I don't have the answers for everything. I have answers for maybe a few things, and you just give them a try, and make it your own. But I'm always right. That's what podcast is for. I'm always trying to learn and try new things. But if you can do it from a state of play, right? And if you can do it from a state of trust, and if you can do it from a state of faith, and I'm a believer in having a relationship with God, and whatever that is for you, because it just, to me, it makes life more meaningful. And again, how to live in faith when we have a dangerous environment where we're worried about our families, we're worried about the government, we're worried about food, we're worried about whatever, right? And so if you look at, I think it's David Hawkins, sometimes I guess that he does this map of consciousness in the consciousness scale. And if you also look at the Kybalion, it talks about the law of polarity. And so the highest levels of, let's say, consciousness would be enlightenment, but also joy and passion and love. Those are at the highest human states of emotion, right? So when you're all the way down at fear and protection, you're not feeling good. Life is scary, and you're not, manifesting, or you're not going into a flow state. You're not going into peace and ease, just peace. You just do, on a scale of 1 to 100, how peaceful is your day? Well, shit, I'm in anxiety and stress. I would say I'm at a 30, right? So, okay, what can we do to improve that? What are the things that are stressing you out? Right. And then because you can actually learn how to forward. So there's a lot of things that you can do. And, I think even just praying and getting clear and journaling, you'll find your own answers. Whether you want to find a coach or a podcast, just start journaling, talking to yourself, praying, finding connection, and moving forward.
Absolutely. And I love that you're mentioning these like sort of the energies or the vibrations of these different states that we can be in. And I think a lot of times we assume that we have no control over that. And yet, when we look at techniques, even like, say, meditation or even just a gratitude journal, right? Research shows that when we put intention into these activities, that we can shift into a state of gratitude, which is right there with love and joy, and shift our energetic state. And then the more times we do that, as you were saying before, like the more times we play ping pong, just like that, the more times we practice gratitude or practice meditation in whatever form that a person chooses, we start to realize, oh, how do I put my focus on something intentionally and how do I put myself into a certain state? Would you say?
Yes, 100%. And that's a very key insight. Most people believe that they're a victim to their emotional states, right? So somebody cuts you off in traffic, and of course, you have to get mad and flip them the finger and lose your mind, right? So basically, it's an external stimulus that created an internal response. When the reality is you can control and mitigate those internal responses. And that's where our free will comes in, I think. So if you're at the point in your journey wherever, you get road rage all the time, when something happens, stop, just take 3 deep breaths, right? Try to process that emotional anger. And over time, it'll stop becoming an unconscious habit, an unconscious reaction. You won't immediately go to anger. So it takes a little bit of time. And you can do that with anything, right? That little space, that gap of in between of, okay, how am I going to react to that? And then also to not judge yourself or be upset that you're upset. Oh, I have this emotional, I'm getting frustrated. That's okay. You can feel frustration, but do you want to act in frustration? Do you want to respond in frustration? Do you want to live in frustration? I like Alan Watts, who does a ton of work on Zen. And I got his book, like The Way of Zen, back in the day when I was living in Whistler, and I just saw it there. It was like a free book they're doing like with the table of free books. I pick it up. It's like, oh, this book is going to be awesome. I've read some books on Zen. It was one of the hardest reads I've ever had. And I had to like have a dictionary with me. I was like, what is going on? Like, why is it so hard? A dictionary, every friggin' paragraph just to get through this thing. It's so hard. So he was brilliant and his lectures are amazing. They're still available
Yes.
on YouTube. But he said, in Buddhism, they say life is suffering. But what he says is more accurately, it's frustrating. Life is frustrating. So if you live in a rainy climate, you shouldn't be frustrated when it rains because that's just what happens. So when you get up and life is frustrating you, maybe stop reacting to it in that way, realizing that this is a part of it and you can build your mental resilience and you can decide, okay, when I see frustrations, how do I want to respond rather than these states? And that becomes a choice and you can train your mind to have a different automatic response, but it'll take a little bit, you know? And, even in learning all this stuff, I am grumpy and reactive. But I learned, you just stay there for shorter periods rather than stewing on it, right? For you stub your toe at 6 a.m. and you're pissed till 9 p.m. when you go to bed, right? So you can learn it's like, I was only pissed until dinner and then I let it go. Great. That's a huge improvement. Then
I
I'm
love
learning to
that.
let it go and let it go and let it go, right? So to be easy on yourself, to be kind to yourself is so important. I feel like so many people are just so hard on themselves, myself included. If we can be a little bit more kind and a little bit more compassionate to ourselves, if our inner critic to just be a little bit more kind, to ourselves, and if we could speak to ourselves a little bit differently, how we would talk to a loved one, how we talk to a child, how we talk to our parents, just to consider that, right? And to know that that internal dialogue is just, it's not a real thing. You're the one observing it, right? You're the power behind that. So you give power to the thoughts when you take action. That's it, right? We all have crazy thoughts, and it's our actions. That's what we're gonna, that's where free will is, right? So I go to the grocery store, someone does something rude, I was like, oh, well, I just learned this sweet, you know, kick to the legs and uppercut, you know? It's like I could choose that, or I could choose to just let it go and walk away, right? So it's in the choice that, that's where free will, decides who we're going to be, how we shape our lives, how we shape our decisions here and who we become.
I love that. And I love Alan Watts. I've learned so much from him too. And I love this, just how to create that space. A lot of times I talk patients through that too, how to find a space where you can separate out the critical thoughts from yourself and really identify who am I really? And then and create a little space before even before the anxiety takes over, right? We can start to create a little space between ourselves and anxious thoughts. And it does like you're describing, it just takes that first of all awareness that that's possible and then practicing it moment by moment. And I really do believe that, like in our childhood, still to this day. I mean, I hope this changes in the future, but for most of us who are adults now, in our childhood, we first of all, we didn't learn any of this, and our parents didn't know any of this. And mostly we were told that we're not supposed to feel sad or angry, or we're not supposed to feel upset, and we would get punished even if we felt those things. And so just to acknowledge that it makes sense that we're only learning it now, like and I love this where you're talking about being gentle with yourself, like you're only human and we're all just learning as we go. So when you find that critical voice attacking yourself, now it's just internalized trauma that's talking to you, but you can catch it and you can notice it and you can shift it. And even within yourself, right? Here we are, even on an external world, you're describing if you're at the grocery store, you can choose how you want to respond. And you can do the same thing inside your own mind. What am I noticing of my thoughts and how do I want to choose to respond to them? Such powerful tools. Thank you so much, Matt, for sharing all of that.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, that's the important thing, right? Is just trying to improve little by little, but being okay with where you are. One of the things that I like to share with my athletes and people that I coach is that I start with athletics where you're trying to have like peak potential, like win the championship, get the gold medal, right? And so, or you're trying to do a transition in your life and become an entrepreneur, or whatever the case is. You're trying to achieve this goal. Well, if you could be whole, happy, and harmonious in the process, then you're doing it with power because the end result isn't going to make you any happier, right? Like you get a Stanley Cup or you get an Olympic gold. Well, you're like, oh my God, I just won the race. And like, yeah, woohoo, you're just absolutely fired up, and then you're on the stage, woo, you're fired up, right? Well, guess what? That's going to wear off in a couple days. You might get a homecoming, you get this clout, but all of a sudden it's going to go back down to who you are. And then was all that years of work. It was all the process of becoming who you wanted to be, achieving what you wanted, and then the process after. So it's all in the process if you can be whole, happy, and harmonious. And also from a performance perspective, if you're the one taking the game winning shot, let's just say basketball, and you got to make the free throw, LeBron James making the free throw for the win. If his whole self worth is on the line, taking that shot, you have a lot more stress hormones, a lot more anxiety going through. But if he's like, all right, I'm totally cool with who I am. I'm choosing to make this shot and I'm okay if I make it or not. He's gonna have a far more likely scenario of making that shot. Um,
Isn't that amazing? I love that.
mm, yeah,
Right? That really just shows us like, okay, as we think, oh, it's when we're going to be most stressed about it that we're going to perform better, but it's actually the opposite. And I see that with health too, like when we're most in the flow in the process, then all of a sudden our health shifts so much faster than if we're constantly worried, am I doing it right? Is it going to get there? Am I ever going to feel better? Right? And so I love that. And when you help people with performance, how does that look? So what might be common scenarios that people contact you about and how much time do you work with them? What does that look like?
yeah. So over the years, it's kind of changed. For it started in sports performance, and then working with just kids, and then running snowboard camps and teaching them all the stuff to Zen athlete, and then higher performing athletes. So some nitro circus, a lot of extreme sports athletes, pro skiers, pro snowboarders, stuff like that, and actually a lot of freestyle motocross. The higher the consequence, usually they'd want to work with me because for in basketball, if you miss a shot, you're not going to break both your legs at once, right? But you might in freestyle motocross. So yeah,
Oh
you
my
know,
gosh.
you're a lot more open to the mental, emotional, spiritual side because there's a physical consequence right away. And then through the podcast, it's been mostly helping people with knowing who they are and their life purpose. And so once we get clear on that, then we use all the peak performance, mindset, spirituality, law of attraction, everything to create that, right? But it's usually not what people think. That's the hardest part. So the thing that I do, mostly is helping people understand what they really want. It's not their life purpose as an end result, it's the direction. Then applying spirituality plus mindset and then overcoming some of those common blocks that we all have. And so it's either one on one and groups, and I'm running programs. So I'm actually designing a new one this year. I just always kind of change it. So I did a group for 2 years where people ran, they go through a program I called Soul Compass, and then we all got together and it was a little bit of a mastermind. And so for me, I'm just shifting it a little bit this year because of all the things that have gone on. I've just noticed a lot more people in transition. They've got the career, but then something happened and they want to shift out of the career, or something happened where they need to reimagine everything. And so this kind of brings you from holy, like midlife crisis, or the career's gone, or I hate this, I need to get out. What do I do? And so we go from getting clear to what you want, adding those tools, and then the peak performance stuff, because I feel like the philosophy it is most important because there's so many programs that are like 90 days and you'll get this. Mine is like, no, 10 years maybe, but you'll be so excited about it. It might be 3 months. It might, but you won't give up. That's the important thing. You're choosing how you want to steer and live your life. And the result, it's not up to us, but you'll be taken care of. And this is how you actually see what I refer to as the God force or spirit. I've seen it in my life. My clients have seen it where it wants you to do what you came here to do. The analogy that I use is like, we're all in the forest, right? We all have our unique skills and abilities. And what society does is it wants every beaver to be, I say everything's a duck, all the workers are different ducks, but a beaver wants to be a beaver, a hawk wants to be a hawk, an eagle wants to be an eagle, caterpillar wants to be a caterpillar, all these different things. And we're all kind of pigeonholed into the same thing. But when, the hawk is doing what it's supposed to do, when the groundhog is doing what it's supposed to do, they're going to be so excited. But when you're not doing what you're supposed to do, you feel terrible. And that's how most people feel, but they justify why it needs to be this way. And whether it's taking responsibility and accountability for your family and making a living, I agree with that. I don't think we should chuck our responsibilities. And when you really know who you are, what you're capable of, and why you're making those choices, you'll know for sure if that's aligned, but maybe it'll be like a 5-year transition, right? And then you'll be ready for that next opportunity. So you can choose to go through and just say, this is what it is, or you can choose to be proactive. And it's just like someone who's out of shape. If you're way out of shape, it just takes a little bit each day. I can't give you a 90 days and lose 200 pounds, but I can show you the path to being very strong and fit in a year or two by changing the way you live, not going to the hospital and getting liposuction. It'll work, but it's not really going to work, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I totally believe in that method of thinking too. A lot of times I find myself saying it's about being committed, but not attached to the outcome. And that's that tricky balance point, right? How do we be all in and yet not like thinking, oh, this has to be in 90 days, or this is going to look definitely like this? Because sometimes by the time we get through the process, it looks different than what we thought it was going to look like.
Yeah, 100%. And that's a really great distinction, committed but not attached. And it's being in alignment, right? It's being in alignment and then congruence with yourself and how you feel in this, life, right? You could get all the money in the world. And that's a lot of the people I work with too. Is like, you figured out the money. Great. But why are you miserable? Or why are you still needing more money? Or why do you feel like you have no purpose? Or, and then you can look at all the studies and the books on death, what people regret. They regret not pursuing the things that they love, spending time with family, the really important stuff. And I don't know what this quote came from, but it's like, you sacrifice your time for money and money for health and however that works, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so those are all the most important things. And if you decide that they're not, great, at least you know, right? But I want to work with people who, they want to do something meaningful. They want to contribute to the world. They want to have healthy, loving relationships. They want to grow mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. They want to be good members of their community. They want to pass this knowledge down. They want to respect children and their elders. They want to respect other people. They want to pursue the truth no matter what they uncover. They want to be respectful to other people. And so, that is hard. And this path is hard. This is way, way, way harder than getting a comfy job that's gonna pay you the bills. I can guarantee you that. It is way harder. and it's way more rewarding, you know? I've given the example let me think. Yeah, if I died tomorrow, like, I think I would have, like, you do the life review, and I've interviewed some people who've done near-death experiences. I've had several. I've had, like, 4, gun to my head, almost fell off a cliff a couple times. What was the other one? Yeah, machete, some crazy stuff. But I remember the one where I was stuck on the cliff and it was bad. I had to get back down, and if I messed up, I was dead. I was totally dead. And I just realized I said, "Okay, well, I came what uh, I came or I did what I the best I could." I kept figuring out I kept asking myself, "What's most important? What do I wanna do? How can I help?" All these different things. And I said, "Oh, yeah, I guess my work is done." And, my partner was with me, and I asked her, said, "Well, what did you think?" And she goes, I had regrets." And the only distinction I think with my life and my friends and everyone I've talked to is I just try to figure out what's most important to me and how can I take that and use that and contribute to other people. So, at this point, the podcast, okay, there's like almost 600 episodes. That's years and years of work. At least something I'm proud of it. Like it's not perfect. It's not the greatest podcast that ever was, but the intent that I had was pure and I did my best. And did I slack and did I, probably do stupid things and did I drink too much and Whistler and did I piss around? Yeah, I did all kinds of stupid shit. But and I still do. But at least I have, that intent. And my David Goggins are one of these guys that's like, wake up at 5 and like crush it super hard all the time. And, no, I'm not like that at all. I'm confused and I ponder and I'm just me. And I try to make peace with that. But at least I know that if I die, I'm trying and I'm trying to think and I'm trying to be deliberate. I'm trying to be intentional. I'm trying to do my best and I'm asking and I'm praying and I'm reflecting. And I think that's important. And so when you do that and you begin to design your life on purpose, it's challenging, but it's more rewarding. And you do notice a God force. Something benevolent is trying to help you. God wants you to do what you were uniquely made to do. But if you're like, well, I'll only do it if I make the same salary that I have now. Well, then go have yourself, bud, because you're not doing it for the right reasons. Right. And it says in the Bible, and it says this in most religious texts, you cannot serve mammon and God at the same time. You cannot serve money or materialism and life itself at the same time. In Native American culture, they say all my relations. What's the intent of what you're doing? Right. So, and that's one of the big issues we have in this world is people's pursuit on materialism, right? We need the money. And that's going to be people's chains. It already is their chains. The new form of slavery for a lot of years has been money. And we do need money. It's not to vilify money. We do need it, but it's the pursuit of money over everything else. That's the distinction.
And just, yeah, realizing how can we shift around our prioritization, our value system, our way of decision making, really, because it comes down to what little, even the micro decisions we make each day and each moment, right? How do we making those decisions?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and it's not again, to be clear, it's not to vilify money, not to say that we don't need it. We do need it. It's just that like, you've got your business and you got it going, and then they say, "Hey, you can 10x your profits if you do this thing that's a bit sketchy." That in your heart when you hear it, it's going to harm someone else. You immediately just say no. That's how it works. You know what? No, that is not in integrity with who I am. That harms my fellow man or something. I'm going to choose this other thing. I'm going to have enough. I'm taken care of, but I need that new car. I don't have this. I need this next thing. And that's where we get distracted. And I feel like that's where we have a lot of people doing livelihoods that cause harm. And they can start to sacrifice their values. And I feel like potentially this whole entire human experience, as I viewed it, could be this opportunity to not sell our soul. I've kind of gone in my podcast some of the darker stuff, and if you've looked into Hollywood and things like that, like I studied propaganda mindset, so I knew about hypnosis and stuff in my teenage years, and I always wondered why we had war and starvation, how these systems are in place. Then I was studying mindset and then hypnosis, and I realized, ooh, wow, they use mass hypnosis on people. That's fascinating. These are some of the techniques. That's why they don't work on me because I know what they're doing. But crap, I lost my train of thought. I don't even can't remember where I was going there. What the heck was I talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome anyway, and just to think, that to become more aware of how people get influenced, and sometimes as you become more aware of all of this, then we can see a little bit more clearly, when someone maybe isn't coming from this place, and maybe that's part of your performance work too, is helping people how to navigate in a world of humans that some have been doing this kind of work and coming from this place and others are not. How do we navigate all in this existence together?
Yeah, and as you said that, I kinda reminded my train of thought because I go way, way deep off into the rabbit hole. But the
Yeah.
idea is that, like, when you're a kid and I remember stealing a kid's dinky car, right? And then feeling horrible when I got caught, right? But I should feel horrible for that because I did something that was wrong, right? It's wrong to take other people's shit. So right?
Mhm.
So as you get older in these different jobs, like, maybe you're not doing meaningful work that's really helping people or you're not proud of it, right? So you think, this goes against that feeling that I have inside. And so it's like this little compromising of who you are and your soul. And this whole experience may be, and this is what I was getting down. So I appreciate you giving me some
Yes.
feedback. Not to sell your soul because they can poison your food and your water and the television and education and every single thing. When you look into it, it's almost like upside down world. And when you get right to the root of everything, it's almost like upside down world. And you think, holy crap. I remember looking into war and starvation and then learning all this stuff about food and these guys like, holy crap, like government trying to kill me? Like, what in the heck is going on? I thought they were supposed to be on my side. All right. Well, they can't be trusted. Interesting. So, it's like this is nuts. But they can do all that stuff, but that feeling inside, what your choice is, you're the only one who can go steal. I can choose to go steal that kid's stinky car again. I can choose a livelihood that does not contribute. And again, it's not judgment. It's like I remember working in cars. I guess it is judgment. Like I'm judging. I think I'm still learning the distinction on like judgment. Like because someone was like, oh well, because in my podcast field, I think it's important to speak the truth. And it's like, oh, I feel like you're judging. And I was like, yeah, like I judge a man beating the crap out of a small woman bad, you know? And
Yeah.
I cross the line, I'll come over and I'll stop that if I can. So it's okay to judge, but like you can only make your own choices. I can't make those choices for someone else. So I think that that's important. So I think, at the end of the day, it's just important to realize we're making our own choices and it's important to have our integrity. And I remember working in cars where you'd make a lot more money if you oversold the customer and I
Mm.
couldn't do that. And I remember seeing people have this challenge with it, right? Some people were all about it. They didn't even give a shit. You know what I mean? They would just oversell like crazy. I could never do that, but I could also see the people in between it. And I think that was a soul battle. They knew in their heart to charge that much is not right. It's just not right. Yeah, you get some bucks, and I never did. So it's not right. And so I feel like it's that idea, right? It's very subtle. And over time, it's going to lead you to different results. And we can just simplify it. But the beautiful thing is when we're okay with what we have, when we're okay with our trust and relationship with God and what we do, when we are focused on right livelihood and we're proud of ourselves and we have good quality relationships, we have a powerful mental, emotional, spiritual state. We have faith that this is a divine universe, although all the craziness is going on. We're going to be more empowered in our decision making. And most importantly, when we die and we face that mirror on the other side, whatever that is, we're going to have less regrets. We're going to know that we did our best. We faced fear with, a little bit more power and we didn't just go along because it was the easy thing to do.
Totally. And because I think really too, what I think about when I'm listening to you is how many people I think do feel lost in this life and this existence. Like we've lost track of who I am and what is my purpose. And sometimes we have a moment in our life where like, wait a minute, who am I and am I really doing what I'm wanting to do? And when that's where it comes. So if anyone listening is having those moments where you're like, how did I even end up here, wherever you are, you know? And you're like, how do I actually figure out who I am and what I want to be doing? And that alone is a very courageous thought because it means that you're on the brink of creating change. And sometimes that's a scary place to be because I think that's where, like you mentioned, sabotaging ourselves. Sometimes we have that thought and we quickly stop ourselves. But if you are at that point where you're like, hey, you know what? Maybe something else is possible. Maybe something else is possible for my life or my health or for my family and I'm asking these questions and wanting to guidance along this path, then I think that's when I definitely would say reach out to Matt and get some input. And I'm also here to help. Matt, one last thing is I'm tempted to ask you about this because from my experience, where I've also learned a lot of this awareness about sort of our human experience and how to find ourselves and our purpose, is through use of psychedelic medicines. Is that something that you have experience with as well?
Yeah, that's definitely a deep one. I have, experience with psychedelic medicines, plant medicines, ayahuasca, things like that. I preface it to say that you have to want an honest change to do something like that, right? People, it ayahuasca, because I did it years ago before it became mainstream, and I believe it to be very powerful and very effective and very helpful. And there is a dark side to it for people abusing it, for not going in the right set and setting, for not being ready, for looking for this magic pill. And if you treat it like that, you're going to get your butt kicked, and it could actually cause you harm. So I like to preface that because I find like the new people, there's a lot of new young people, just so, and that's why I do the podcast too. It's all these young, spiritual life coaches at 24 with no kids, it's just like, I
There's
consider
something
myself,
about kids that teaches us a lot, isn't there?
yeah, it's like, I'm like, I've been doing this like my whole life and I've dedicated to it and I still only know a little bit, and I still respect my elders and what they have going on. So a lot of the kids are just like, they're glamorizing where that does exist. But that said, if it's got to be honest, it's got to be authentic. You've got to do it in the right way. And if you do that, they can be incredibly powerful. Even mushrooms with the right people, if someone's never experienced that and you're like, holy smokes. But then you got to be able to integrate it. And that's the whole thing about those, whether you have an experience with God that makes no sense, because I know people have spiritual awakenings and all this stuff. You could have that a psychedelic spiritual awakening with, I believe, an honest request from God in nature. Like with all of your heart and your mother effing soul. And you go into nature and you say, please help me. And if you don't think you believe in God, just try this one. Just do a mental thought and think you're in a car and all of a sudden you're on a highway and it's icy, and if you don't have ice, just think about something where you know you're gonna die. You're in a plane. Sorry if you fly and this will scare you or something else. And you see death coming. You're like, "Oh, shit. What are you gonna say?" Just think about what you say. You see it coming. What do you say? And, I definitely I can't imagine very many people saying, mine is, "Oh God, please help." You know? "Jesus, please help me." I'm a Christian, I grew up a Christian. That's just my background and upbringing. But that's what I would say. I know it. I'm like, holy shit, God help me.
Mhm.
So I just find that fascinating that that's my honest reaction, right? That's the one that comes up. I don't say Buddha. I don't say anything else. I say, oh, so just try that, So it's just an interesting thought experiment to, go through. I got distracted again in my own mind just thinking about
No,
that because
but that's okay. No, I'm just thinking that like I totally agree with you. Having experienced psychedelic experiences, I would say that then it becomes more apparent that we can experience those kind of moments in meditation, in nature, like you mentioned at the beginning, even while watching a sunset. You can have these moments of realization and self-reflection and identifying yourself and your purpose even without a psychedelic substance. And yet, when we go through any of those moments or like a near death experience, it's a matter of how do we then integrate that into our life. And so, if someone has been through something like that and you're now trying to reconcile, what does that mean in my life? That's exactly when having someone like me and Matt to guide you to say, okay, what were those thoughts you had? What was that experience you had? And 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 how do we help you to integrate that into your life? Because that's about the performance to me, right? That's your performance is all about what are those next steps you want to take with intention.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like you're bringing up something so important because it's the idea that, psychedelics help you break the mold. People don't realize that like the mental conditioning and everything in the world is so strong once you're stuck in this mode, you feel helpless. So if you do like a mushrooms or an ayahuasca, all of a sudden that mental mold just gets shattered. You are just like, what the heck is going on? Which for people who are not ready will be a frightening thing. And for me, who is very open minded, ayahuasca is not fun at all. It gave me the most beautiful, wild experiences. However, it is also terrifying. So it's like almost communicating with God in a way. It's like you want to be ready and you want to be sincere, or you're going to get your butt kicked. And so it's so important. But what they can do is break the mold of the mind to open you up for the work that you need to do. And when you go to do the work, I was just thinking about the idea of like the perspective that when you're praying with all of your heart and soul, that God is listening, because I feel like when people lose faith, they think they're praying to nothing. And I feel like it's almost a perspective where God exists or God doesn't in your view, or life is benevolent or life is not, or there's nothing, there's no spiritual realm, there's no metaphysical realm, there's no Tao, there's no nothing, there's no point, or there is, right? And so maybe there is no point to this. Maybe there is no God. Maybe all could be, I don't know. However, I've experienced some stuff that make no friggin' sense at all. And so it leads me to believe that there is God. It makes me believe that there is a force, a Tao, a spirit, that I'm connected to everything, that I was created from these experiences that go so far beyond conscious word and conscious language. The best way that I can relate it to people is like if you were a goldfish and then the goldfish became, he's still a goldfish, but he can speak English, and you tour him around for like 10 years as a goldfish. He's like in a bubble and, he's your homie, and you teach him all this different stuff. And it's like, all right, well, when, the next level of like, after death, you're going to get to be a human or something. Even though it kind of goes into evolutionary idea, but he goes back to being a goldfish and tries to explain it to his goldfish buddies. Can't happen. It's so beyond comprehension. God in this existence is so beyond comprehension. It's beyond word. And so that's how we have to move in faith. And I feel like that's why this is a free will universe, because we get to make the choices between good and evil. And we all know the difference. We can feel it. And I feel like that's what this test is, or this experience is, or this growth is. It's like, it's really that, simple choice, right? In that it seems to be also really going towards the materialism versus like a God, spirit, nature, life, your community as well. So that seems to be the constant when you shake it all down, that's the underlying theme, it seems like.
And really, like, those have been the themes back in history, as you've pointed out, when we travel, when we experience different cultures, we look at and study different religions, some of these same concepts were there all along. It's not like we're just figuring this out. We're just coming back and revisiting some of these concepts and saying, how do we apply it in our lives today? And how do we help people to use these? I look at it as, how do we use these concepts so that people can achieve better quality of life and longer life with doing what they love with the people they love. And so, if we ignore these concepts, maybe we're going to be less successful at that. But if we can take in all this information, integrate it, and then apply it for ourselves, maybe we can be more likely to achieve that quality and length of life that we're hoping for. So, oh my gosh, thank you so much for this conversation, Matt. Really loved it. And everyone listening, to find more about Matt, go to mattbelair.com. I'll put the link. And Matt, anywhere else they should go to find more about you? The podcast for sure.
Yeah, the website works. Thank you so much for having me on. I have a Telegram and Twitter, but I think, Telegram and website will let you get you where you need to go. But thank you for having me on. Thank you for the work that you do. I really appreciate you and being able to speak to your audience. And I'll just leave them with, one of the favorite spiritual teachings that I've ever heard was from my friend David Lombear Cinepass. And he said, most people are so heavenly minded, but they're no earthly good. And he said, do 3 kind acts a day, go out of your way to do it, and don't tell anyone. And for me, it's my favorite spiritual lesson. Some people think if we all meditate, it's a million people will shift the planet. Could be, I don't know. However, I would now at this stage prefer everyone, if I could mandate anything, it's the 3 kind acts, because it's spirituality in action. I think that that's a very important distinction. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I appreciate it. And thank you for everyone who's listened so far.
You're welcome. So glad to talk to you. And I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Sounds good.
Okay.
See you later.
Thanks for listening to How Humans Heal. If you liked this episode, leave a rating and a review. And for more resources, visit drdoni.com.